Hello and welcome back to You Tell Me. Today we're going to do things a little different. You can see we're already posting this on a Friday, not a Monday. Instead of discussing the Constitution, we're going to discuss a somber event in history. September 11th, 2001, a day that will never be forgotten.
News, we have a very tragic alert for you right now. An incredible plane crash into the World Trade Center here at the lower tip of Manhattan.
It's believed a 737 has crashed into this speculation at this point, but at least 3 floors taken out, crashed into the side of the building. Joining us right now, one of the producers with Fox Report, Owen Mugan on the scene. Owen, what do you know? What do you see? Where are you?
Yeah, Brian, I'm on the roof of my building, which is about 5 blocks to the south of the World Trade Center. I'm looking right now at the World Trade Center. There's a massive gaping hole on the second tower. It's about 15 stories from the roof. It's just unbelievable to look at. There's a massive hole.
It looks like something out of a movie. There is a huge hole in the side of tower number 1.
Tower 1.
Owen, your apartment is just a few blocks from it. Did you hear anything?
I was lying in bed. All of a sudden I heard what sounded like a plane or something coming extremely low, and then we just heard this shattering explosion. I ran up to the roof and confronted by this horror. There's a gaping hole. I can see the south face, and there are flames. There are papers flying out of the windows, black flames. There are flames coming out of multiple floors.
Did it sound like there is one report on one news channel here in New York City that perhaps it was a jet, perhaps a 737. When you heard the noise, did it sound like a prop job or a jet?
It sounded like a jet, but from where I was, I just couldn't tell. All I know is that there was something flying through the air, and then this massive impact. Whether it was a jet, I just don't know.
Listening to you right now, I hear a lot of sirens. Is that what you're hearing right now? I mean,
yeah, I'm going to move to the front of my, which will. Yeah, you can just see it right now. You can see emergency vehicles tearing south from the West Side Highway, heading towards the scene. There are tons of people in the streets. There are papers, things fluttering out. I can't see any evidence of what it was that could have crashed. All I can see is just this massive gaping hole with tons of black smoke falling out of the building.
Owen, we have a satellite picture right now.
There.
That is it.
A live picture. As you can see, Edie, this is different. This is a different perspective than we saw earlier.
September 11, 2001, when that happened with the towers, I was driving to work. I was a teacher at one of the schools, and I was 10 minutes away from when almost getting there at school when all of that was happening. That day we spent helping the students understand what was going on. But yes, that's what I was doing.
I was in my 8th grade social studies class, and my teacher told us immediately after it happened. I was very shocked, afraid, and very confused.
So on September 11th, I was at work, and I remember they told us to turn on the TV so that we could watch, because one plane had already hit the towers. And so when we turned on the TV, then the next plane hit, and I was just so oblivious as to what was coming next. I was engaged to my husband, and a couple days later, I remember him calling me to tell me that they were shipping out from his base to go and help clean up in New York. And it was the beginning of what's been a really long career for him.
On September the 11th, I was driving home after being at a doctor's appointment, and I had turned the radio on, and I heard about a plane hitting, and it just seemed I just didn't quite comprehend it. And then when I got home, my husband was in front of the TV, and it just became so surreal. It's hard to believe that a plane had hit the way it did, but that's where I was at. I was traveling on my way from a doctor's appointment.
September 11, 2001 is a day I'll never forget. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I can always bring back all the feelings. I remember how I felt.
I worked in the file room at a bank. I remember I would listen to Bobby Bones on 96.7, the radio station there in Austin. And he always was saying, you know, a bunch of silly things and doing things over the radio that a lot of times I was just half listening. This particular day, I had been putting in numbers for files, and so I had been sitting there at the computer with the radio right next to me. And I just remember him saying, you know, a airplane just hit the trade tower. And by the sound of his voice, I knew that he was being completely honest, like he wasn't being, you know, silly Bobby Bones on the radio. And so we got up, we went out of the room. We realized that a lot of other people on the floor were hearing the same report. You know, some of us were crying, some of the other people, you know, were in shock. And my supervisor got a little black and white TV out from her desk and she plugged it in, and we watched all this unfolding on the live news. And it was a very scary time. But I remember, you know, Roy was in South Korea at the time. That's where he was stationed. And I had, you know, planned an airplane trip. You know, it's an 18-hour flight over there. That had been in the works for me to go over there. And after that, I canceled my flight. You know, he didn't want me flying. I didn't want to fly. And my parents didn't want me flying. But all I know is, for me, I will never, ever forget 9/11, the people that lost their lives, the first responders that are, you know, that went up there trying to save lives, ones that got sick later on, ones that passed away during that very fateful day. And so for me, all I know is that I will never, ever forget 9/11. Never forget.
On September 11th, I was still in the Army. I worked at a brigade and I was on my way to work when I heard on the radio that a plane had hit one of the towers. When I got to my office, I knew how bad it was because the second one had just been hit, and our base went on complete lockdown for quite a while. And it was preparing for what we might have to do next.
So on September 11th, 2001, I was at a staff meeting that morning, and it was over in a conference room on the church property, and we were all just walking over after staff meeting, and one of the guys who had beat us to the office came running out and was like, "You guys got to see this, what's happening?" And so then we went and watched his computer screen and caught up with it. We were actually supposed to fly out to Baton Rouge and leave the church in about an hour to head that way. So anyway, that's where I was at.
When I found out what happened on September 11th, I was in 10th grade history class, and my teacher rolled in the TV and turned on the news, so the whole class was watching. And at first I didn't really understand what had happened. I didn't pay attention to the news or anything at that age, or have any idea of what was going on in the world. But later I realized the magnitude of what had happened.
My daughter Olivia's first birthday that day. And so as things changed, I didn't know how much they were really going to change. I was home with Olivia. We were watching Clifford on PBS, and I got a phone call from my husband saying that we needed to turn on the news. So we changed it to the news and started seeing tragedy unfold. And I actually saw the second Twin Tower hit live by an airplane. I knew at that moment that things had changed in America forever. The whole world was changed. And I just didn't know how much. I was immediately worried about my son, Harrison, who was at preschool. I was worried about my husband at work. He worked near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at the time, a suburb. And I was just worried about all the people on the planes. I was really worried about the people in New York City. And it was just a great sadness overcame me. And we've all been changed ever since.
It was 19 years ago, and I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing. I was actually at home, and I just happened to turn on the news, and I was listening to a morning show, and it just didn't sound right. And so I tuned my ears in and heard that a plane had crashed into one of the towers. And we didn't know at that point if it was just an accident or if it was actually terrorism. I called my neighbor across the street because I knew that she had a lot of family in the area. And she came running over, and we just watched. Actually, by the time she got to our house, we watched the second plane go into the second tower, and we just froze. It was something so surreal, still not knowing what had happened. And as things unfolded, I came to learn actually the next day that my former boss and his wife were actually on one of the planes that flew out of Boston, and actually one of the ones that, the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. And then another coworker of mine was on her way to vacation in Hawaii, and she was on one of the planes that crashed into one of the towers. And it really hit us hard up in the Northeast because I'm from New Hampshire, and our major airport is Boston. And so there were lots and lots of people in the New England area who knew people personally that had passed away from this tragedy. So I am just so glad. There's so many people that don't know or understand, young people that don't know about 9/11. And I'm so glad that you're learning about it so that you can keep the memory of all these people alive for years and years and years to come. So good job, girls, learning about it. Thanks.
On September 11th, I was at the Raleigh County Grade School in my school bus. I'd driven my bus route. It was a beautiful sunny day in Kansas, and had the radio on, and the 8 o'clock news came on, and they said a plane had flown into the World Trade Center. I immediately was reminded that in World War II, a bomber, an Allied bomber, had gotten lost in the fog and flown into the Empire State Building. I thought, that's just really freaky that that could have happened again. But then I heard it was a beautiful sunny day in New York, and I thought, well, it wasn't an accident. So then I went home and for a few moments turned on TV. About the time the second plane flew into the second tower, and I realized something really wrong was happening, that there was some evil afoot. Didn't know what it was. First time I'd heard Al-Qaeda, I think, or maybe the second time in my life when they mentioned it that morning. And then later when the plane flew into the Pentagon, shortly after that I left, listened to the radio, and then heard about another plane that was maybe headed to the Capitol and how it had crashed. I knew that it was a really big day. A lot of people lost their lives, and some very wicked, evil people were attacking our country.
So on September 11th, I was in my 4th year of college, and actually right when the first attack happened, I didn't know it. I was on the track at college at Florida State University, and when I got back to my room, my roommate had a radio that she always had on, and I was in my room and listened on the radio that a plane had hit one of the towers. And in that moment, I was doing stuff and you're hearing it, but you're hearing it and questioning what you're hearing. It was completely surreal. I heard it, and then moments later, they said another plane hit the other tower. And then I started, walking around the house. I lived in the sorority house at the time and telling the girls what had happened and getting them updated. And then at that time, people had been listening. we had the news on downstairs, and then we were watching and listened to when it hit the Pentagon, which personally was scary because I had an uncle at the time working in the Pentagon, and to try and call people at the time was absolutely crazy because everyone was trying to call family members and friends to see if everyone was okay. So it was just a long waiting game. But for someone who can't remember what she did yesterday, I'll never forget where I was when I found out what happened on September 11th. So I'll definitely never forget that day.
The day that 9/11 happened, I was at home. My children were at school, my husband was at work, and I was watching TV and talking to a friend on the phone, and I saw the fires, and at the time I just thought it was a fire, and eventually as we were watching, I actually saw one of the planes hit the tower, and I watched as the tower started to collapse. Over time, we watched the TV almost the entire day. I saw as people poured out of the city by foot out of New York. We got the news about the other two planes that had crashed, and I think it really hit me when we got the news that a plane had hit the Pentagon, because I grew up in DC and I knew where the building was. I'd seen the building several times as a child, so that really hit home. And then over the next couple of days, it just felt surreal. It reminded me almost of the news reports that you saw about Pearl Harbor when that was attacked, and that's what it kind of felt like the US had been attacked. And I remember thinking, I just want my family to be safe. I just want friends to be safe. And I just remember feeling so much sorrow for the people who were really affected, the victims of the planes and the victims at the two towers and the areas nearby that were also affected, and then the firefighters and the police officers and all the different people who tried to go in and helped and got trapped in buildings. It was something that you just don't ever forget, and it stays with you. Even when each anniversary comes around and you realize that it's been this many years, it still feels as if it was yesterday. And I don't think it's something that we shall ever forget. If you were around during that time.
I can talk.
Yes, tell me about September 11th.
September 11th, I was working at Meadowlark Hills. It was around lunchtime, I think, and people were coming into the dining room, and I was setting it up, and there come over the television, because it had a television in the dining room, about the Twin Towers when the plane has hit. When they first started, they didn't know for sure it was a plane. They thought it was a bomb. And then the second one came, and they knew that it was an airplane. And there was thousands of people that died that day. And then they went on to question other people that had seen the planes coming and what all they got to see. And I think one plane hit a building and blew part of the building up.
September 11th, 2001, I was in my room as a teenager in a little town called Hamburg in Germany, and I saw the towers fall on TV, and I wasn't really sure if we were watching a movie or if somebody had turned the news on, and yeah, just a little bit in disbelief. So that's where I was on September 11th.
On September 11th, 2001, I was at my parents' house. My husband had been stationed in Germany, and I had to wait until we had housing to join him. So I was married, my husband was in Germany, and I was in Texas at my parents' house. And my mom called right after she got to work to tell me to turn on the news. At that point, the first plane had just hit the first tower, and seconds after I turned the news on, the second plane hit the second tower. And as she then came home from work, and as she walked in the door, we saw the towers fall live on TV.
Where was I September 11, 2001? At that time, I was stationed in Germany, and I had been in the military for about 2 years. And with the time difference, it was in the evening. So we were actually about to go on a night mission, and a jokester who was in our company, our platoon, came out and said we weren't going on the mission anymore because, I forget what he said, but we weren't going on the mission anymore. And so we all thought he was joking. So we all started laughing. We continued working, and like, no, we're not going on the mission anymore. So like, everybody come back to the platoon house, or whatever it was called, I don't know. And they're like, no, we're not going on the mission anymore. We don't know any more details, but everything's at a standstill, no movement whatsoever. And they're like, something's happened in New York, just go home, that's all we have to say. And I was a poor soldier. I didn't have cable, I didn't have access to anything, and I remember walking in to the barracks, so it's in the evening, and someone had their TV on, and I just poked in, and that's when I had seen what was going on. And I immediately thought of my mom and my sister, because they had flew from North Dakota down to Denver to go to the last game in the Mile High Stadium for the Denver Broncos. And the game was September 10th. So they had went to the game, and then they were flying out of Denver September 11th. Well, obviously that didn't happen. So there's no cell phones. So I knew my mom had messaged me, like emailed me where she was staying in case I needed to get a hold of her, which is weird because why would I have to get a hold of her? But so she gave me, I had the hotel information, so I called the hotel and was able to I remember I called her like on a payphone in the barracks room, and I called the hotel, and of course they're all worried about me being in the military and whatnot, and they were stuck in Denver for a few days, but things changed for us real quick in Germany. It wasn't long before we were all doing 24-hour QRF duties, and it was pretty crazy. We were on lockdown. Our base was extremely small, and like the size of a Walmart parking lot. We're on lockdown for a long time, and I remember not going anywhere for a long time, but just doing QRF over and over and over again for many days. So that's where I was. It was extremely stressful situation just because I was new in the military, and I didn't know what that entailed for us in the coming future. And not long we deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan from Germany, so it really changed my life as far as that, being in the military and whatnot. So thank you.
So I was at school, and I remember the principal came in, whispered something to our teacher gasped, and then all of us were taken into the cafeteria where the news was playing on the TV.
On September 11, 2001, I was in 8th grade in one of my classes at school, and I just know that my teacher had the TV on watching the news channel. I just remember seeing a bunch of people on the streets running, and really didn't know what was going on. She didn't really say anything, and I didn't really know what happened until I went home and actually saw that, the terrorism act pretty much happened.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I remember I was sitting in class at UNCW. It was my ecology class when I found out about the planes crashing into the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. I remember being very shocked and just overwhelmed and just in disbelief, really. And my classmates, we discussed it briefly. For some reason, our professor was out of the room, and someone I'm not exactly sure who the first person was that mentioned it, if the professor came back in or if somehow or another one of my classmates found out about it. But I remember it was during class, and it was just really kind of just unbelievable, and still is to this day, honestly.
I was sitting in 6th grade math class when the Twin Towers were hit.
Hello, my name is David Van Beber. I am Esther and Phoebe and Chloe's uncle. And so I thought I would tell you all about where I was on September 11th, 2001. I woke up that morning for school and I came upstairs to my parents' home, and the news was on, and it said that a plane had flown into the World Trade Center. Everyone thought that it was like an alcoholic, drunk, whatever, pilot, no big deal. Then by the time I got dressed and got to school, I went to the cafeteria, and as I walked into the cafeteria, one of the cooks said a second plane has flown into the World Trade Center. And my friend Nathan Ross and I ran from the cafeteria to the library where there was a television, and they hadn't even turned on the television yet, and Nathan and I were like, you have to turn on the TV, the United States is under attack. Well, that was pretty much what we did. Alright, there's my video.
Well, I was still a college student at the time, but school didn't start for another week or so, so I was still at home and working my summer job at a hotel down at the ocean front. So I was still asleep when it happened. I didn't have to be to work until noon that day, so I remember my mom calling me. She was at work and telling me to turn on the television, and so I did. And I saw what was going on, and I was at home alone, so I was just confused and devastated, and I got ready for work and went in, and it was just a day full of people canceling. We get a lot of visitors from New York and Virginia Beach every summer, so there's a lot of heartbreak on the phone from customers that were calling us and canceling, and so it was a busy day. But it was eerie because it was the first time I had been down at the beach where it was nearly completely empty. Completely empty. No one walking around, no one out and about. Stores, not all the stores were open. Everything just kind of shut down. So it was just the start of a new way of life for all of us. And it's definitely a day I'll never forget.
September 11th, 2001, I was running late to school, and I remember when I got there, I walked by the library, and there were windows where you could see when you walked by. And so I was walking by, and the library was completely filled, standing room. Everybody's standing around this big TV in there, looking to see the TV, and I hadn't watched the news or anything. I was running late, probably slept in, and I was so confused. I thought, what is everyone doing in the library? I couldn't imagine. I was late. I looked at the clock again, I think, to check to make sure. But I was late, and here everybody was hanging out in the library. And I got to my class, and I didn't realize till lunch what had happened about the planes flying into the towers. When we were at lunch, all the TVs were on. The TV in the cafeteria, which I had never seen on before. Some of the classes had TVs on as I walked by through the halls. And so that's when I found out. And when I got home, I really realized the gravity of the situation. There was price gouging going on. The line to the gas station was all the way up the highway. And, there's not a September 11th that goes by where I don't cry and think about the people who gave their life that day to help others. The people who were just going to work or flying a plane flying in a plane, like, they were just people living life, and something terrible happened to them. And, you know, and it wasn't like it was just over then. You know, there was war after that. There were so many things, so many lives affected by that day. And I think one of the beautiful things that I look at, that was the way that our country came together and just loved on each other. And I think that's hope in the midst of the ugly.
I was not born in September 11th, 2001, but I get to hear stories about it so I can learn, even though it makes me very sad. At 7:59, Flight 11 took off from Boston. At 8:14, Flight 175 took off from Boston.
At 8:19, Flight 11, the flight attendant alerted the ground that the plane was hijacked.
At 8:20, Flight 77 took off. At 8:41, United 93 took off from Newark.
8:46, Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower.
At 8:47, people started evacuating the Twin Towers. At 9:03, Flight 175 crashes into the South Building.
At 9:08, the FAA banned all flights through New York's airspace.
At 9:31, President Bush called the events apparent terrorist acts on our country. At 9:37, the Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon.
9:59, the South Tower collapsed.
At 10:07, the crew members and the passengers from United 93 learned about all of the attacks on America. It was at this point where they were going, that they decided that they were going to take the plane back.
Unfortunately, their brave attempts ended in a tragedy. The hijackers crashed the plane in a field in Pennsylvania.
At 10:03, Flight 993 crash landed into the ground. Their bravery saved a lot of lives, but they still died, which is really sad.
10:28, the North Tower collapsed. 102 minutes after the plane crashed.
At 8:30 p.m., President Bush addressed the nation, calling the attacks evil, despicable acts of terror, and declaring that we would stand together to win the war against terrorism. There was 2,977 casualties on September 11th. 1,753 were killed in the Twin Towers. 40 people were killed in United 93.
343 firefighters, 23 New York police officers, 37 port authorities.
We will never forget.
Never forget.
We will never forget.
We will never forget.
Don't ever forget.
We will never forget. We will never forget. I love forget.
A day I'll never forget.
never forget.